If you're an Aquarius, and lately, it feels like everything you wanted was suddenly blocked: the relationship, the opportunity, the future you worked so hard for. Pause. This message didn't find you by accident. Because what's coming isn't a punishment. It's a storm, not to break you but to stop you from walking into the wrong life. You kept trying. You kept giving. You told yourself, just a little more patience and it will work. But deep down you knew something was off. And here's the truth most people never tell you: some doors don't close because you're unworthy, they close because you were being protected. If that sentence just hit your chest, comment "I'm ready" below and receive this message fully. Because in the next moments, you're about to understand why what you lost was never meant to stay, and why this storm is actually leading you somewhere far more powerful. It feels quiet right now. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, but the kind where your thoughts suddenly get louder. You may not have noticed it at first. Aquarius rarely does. You're usually the one who keeps moving forward, thinking, analyzing, believing there's still one more way to fix things. So you stayed a little longer than you should have. You held your breath and told yourself this discomfort was temporary. That if you didn't rock the boat, if you didn't ask too many questions, everything would eventually settle. And maybe no one around you saw the strain. From the outside, it looked like patience, like maturity, like loyalty. But inside there was that subtle tension you couldn't explain. A feeling that followed you into quiet moments. Late nights, long drives, those pauses where your chest felt heavy for no clear reason. Aquarius, that feeling wasn't weakness. It was awareness. You were standing in a place that no longer matched who you were becoming. And your spirit knew it long before your mind was ready to admit it. There's something important about you that most people misunderstand. You don't leave easily. You don't give up quickly. When you commit, you commit with your whole nervous system, your whole future in mind. So when something starts to feel off, you don't walk away right away. You try to understand it. You try to outgrow it. You try to save it. But here's the part no one told you. Sometimes what feels like stability is actually stagnation in disguise. Sometimes waiting isn't wisdom. Sometimes endurance quietly turns into self-abandonment. And that's when the pressure starts building. Not dramatically, not all at once. Just enough to make you tired in a way sleep doesn't fix. Have you noticed how exhaustion shows up differently now than it did years ago, as if your soul is asking for something more honest? That's where the storm begins. Not in chaos, not in destruction, but in that moment when pretending stops working. The storm doesn't announce itself. It arrives as resistance, as delays, as doors that refuse to open no matter how many times you knock. And at first, it feels unfair, like you're being tested, like something is being taken from you. But listen closely. This isn't life pushing you away. This is life refusing to let you stay small. Because if things had continued exactly as they were, you would have slowly dimmed your own light just to keep the peace. You would have kept shrinking your truth to fit a space that stopped honoring it. And that was never the plan for you. Aquarius, let me ask you something gently. When was the last time you felt truly seen without having to explain yourself? When was the last time your intuition didn't have to fight logic just to be heard? This moment you're in now, the confusion, the pause, the sense that something bigger is shifting beneath the surface, it's not random. It's the point where your life starts rearranging itself around who you really are, not who you've been trying to accommodate. And what comes next won't ask you to prove anything, won't demand you betray yourself, won't require you to stay silent just to belong. You're not losing ground. You're being repositioned. And once you see what's been quietly moving behind the scenes, you'll understand why this storm had to come exactly now. Stay with me. It settles in slowly, not as pain. More like a pause you could never explain. There was a season when things simply stopped responding to you. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just quietly, as if the universe lowered its voice and waited to see if you would notice. You kept moving forward anyway. Because that is what you do. You believe in momentum. In effort. In staying kind even when nothing answers back. But there were moments, late at night, when you felt it. That strange pressure behind the chest. That subtle sense of being held at the edge of something you had already earned. You knocked on doors that felt familiar. Doors you had invested your time, your care, your intelligence into. And somehow they stayed closed. Not slammed. Just unmoving. That silence confused you more than rejection ever could. You wondered if you had misread the signs. If you had waited too long. Or trusted the wrong timing. You watched others step into spaces you once imagined yourself standing in. And for a moment, something inside you questioned your worth. But listen closely now. This part matters. What blocked you was never a punishment. It was protection disguised as delay. Aquarius, your soul does not travel through borrowed rooms. You are not meant to inherit spaces that limit your expansion. And some doors only open after you stop shrinking yourself to fit their frame. The universe has a particular way of working with minds like yours. It withholds clarity until you are ready to walk away without bitterness. Until you no longer need approval to feel aligned. Until you trust that being unchosen can be a form of guidance. Think about it for a moment. What if that closed door saved you from becoming someone you were never meant to be? Because every time you were quietly blocked, something else was being preserved. Your originality. Your vision. Your ability to create rather than conform. You see, Aquarius energy does not bloom in crowded rooms. It activates in open skies. In places where your ideas are not explained away or slowly diluted. You were never meant to be managed, only met. And when the path stopped responding, it was not because you lacked value. It was because your frequency no longer matched what waited on the other side. There is a deep dignity in that, even if it did not feel like it at the time. Let me ask you something gently. What part of you were you being asked to protect without realizing it? Because now, as things begin to shift, you may notice something different. A lightness where frustration once lived. A calm replacing the need to prove. Almost as if your spirit already knows that what is coming next will not require you to beg. This is where the story grows quieter and more powerful. Not because everything is revealed, but because you are finally standing where nothing has to be forced. And in that stillness, something important is preparing to move. There is a moment very quiet where the world finally goes still around you. No one notices it, but you do. It usually happens late at night, when the noise fades, when the roles you play during the day gently fall away, and you are left alone with your own breath. That is where the ache has been living. You learned how to smile without effort, how to listen without interrupting, how to hold space for others even when your own hands were shaking inside. People often tell you how calm you are, how strong, how wise, but they never ask what it costs you, because as Aquarius, your pain was never loud. It did not demand attention. It learned to stay polite, to stay invisible, to stay contained. There were moments you wanted someone to notice the way your voice softened, the way your energy pulled back just a little, the way you stopped asking for help because experience taught you it would not come anyway. And still, you showed up. Still, you gave more than was asked. Still, you chose integrity over convenience. That is a particular kind of loneliness. The loneliness of doing the right thing while watching others be rewarded for doing less. The loneliness of being reliable while feeling replaceable. Here is something rarely said out loud. People like you are often taken for granted, not because you lack value, but because your value feels stable, steady, assumed, like air, only noticed when it is gone. At some point, without realizing it, you began to turn that silence inward. You wondered if being unseen meant being unimportant. If giving without applause meant giving too much. If your quiet depth was somehow a flaw in a louder world. Let me pause here with you for a moment. Just breathe. What if the doubt you carry was never yours to begin with? What if it was the echo of environments that could not measure what you bring? What if your sensitivity was not weakness, but a level of awareness most people never reach? Aquarius, you were never meant to be validated by crowds. Your soul does not thrive on noise. It listens for resonance. And lately, something within you has been asking a gentle question, not in words, in feeling. What would it be like to stop proving your worth to places that cannot feel your depth? There is a quiet recalibration happening inside you now, a slow return to yourself, where you begin to remember that being unseen does not erase your light. It simply means your light is not performative. It is internal, enduring. You are learning, maybe for the first time, that self-respect does not always announce itself. Sometimes it shows up as distance, as discernment, as the courage to stop over-explaining your heart. And as this realization settles in, another awareness starts to form. Subtle, but undeniable. Not everything you lost was a loss. Some things stepped away to make room for something that can finally meet you where you are. Can you feel it? That soft shift inside your chest. The sense that your story is not shrinking, it is deepening. Stay with me, because what comes next is not about pain anymore. It is about what awakens when you finally stop abandoning yourself. There is someone your energy keeps circling back to, not because you miss them, but because your nervous system still remembers how much of yourself you had to give away to stay connected. You rarely speak their name out loud anymore, yet their imprint lingers in subtle places. In the way you hesitate before expressing a need. In the reflex to explain yourself too much. In the quiet question that sometimes rises in your chest. Am I asking for too much? This person never had to raise their voice. They never needed drama. Their power came from something far quieter. They let you shine. but only as long as that light reflected back onto them. You were generous with understanding, with patience, with benefit of the doubt. You told yourself that love meant endurance. That loyalty meant staying soft even when something inside you was slowly hardening. And each time you adjusted yourself to keep the peace, they expanded. Each time you minimized your discomfort, they took a little more space. Not because they were evil, but because they were comfortable receiving without reciprocity. Here is the part that may sting a little. They were drawn to you because you see potential in people, because you can sense who someone could become. But they were never interested in becoming that person for you. They thrived on your emotional labor, on your empathy, on your willingness to smooth edges and absorb tension. And when you pulled back even slightly, they made you feel selfish, cold, unreasonable. Aquarius, control does not always look like domination. Sometimes it looks like dependence disguised as closeness, like silence that punishes instead of resolves, like affection that appears only when you are about to leave. You may still catch yourself wondering if you misread everything, if you expected too much, if you should have tried harder. Let me sit with you here for a moment and say this clearly. A connection that requires you to shrink to survive it is not intimacy. It is extraction. Your body knew this long before your mind accepted it. The fatigue, the emotional numbness, the way joy felt muted around them. Those were not flaws in you, they were signals. And now something inside you is shifting again, not with anger, but with clarity. You are beginning to understand that love does not keep score. It does not make you audition for belonging. It does not leave you questioning your worth after every interaction. There is relief in this realization, but also grief. Grief for the version of you who tried to make it work alone, who believed that if you just loved better, everything would balance out. Here is a gentler question to hold now. What parts of yourself are ready to come back home now that you are no longer feeding someone else's emptiness? Because Aquarius, your energy was never meant to be a resource others drain. It is a frequency, and it is meant to be met, not consumed. As this awareness settles in, you may notice a new boundary forming. Not rigid, not defensive, just quiet, firm, natural. And with that boundary comes space. Space where something far more aligned can finally find you. There is a tenderness in the way you held on. Not desperation, not weakness, but devotion to meaning. You stayed because walking away felt like erasing chapters of yourself. Late nights that shaped your patience. Conversations that rewired your hopes. Moments where you believed effort could rewrite fate. For you, letting go was never about the other person alone. It was about honoring the version of you who tried. The one who showed up even when tired. The one who believed love could evolve if given enough time. Aquarius, you are ruled by vision. You see patterns beyond the present moment. You don't just love what is. You love what something could become. That is why release felt impossible. Because your mind kept projecting forward. Imagining the healed version. The awakened version. The future where everything finally made sense. And each time doubt whispered, you answered it with loyalty, with memory, with the quiet hope that endurance itself was proof of purpose. But there is something no one tells you when you are built like this. Sometimes persistence is not a virtue. Sometimes it is a pause button life presses so you can see what you have been avoiding. You are not holding on to the person. You are holding on to the story you told yourself about why it had to matter. About how pain must always lead to transformation. About how loss must always earn its meaning. So you stayed. Not because you didn't know better, but because you needed to believe the sacrifice wasn't wasted. Here is the truth your soul has been circling for a while now. Some connections are not destinations. They are initiations. They arrive to awaken parts of you, to sharpen discernment, to teach you the cost of overgiving. And once the lesson is complete, they lose their grip. The ache you felt was not attachment alone. It was grief for the illusion that staying longer would somehow rewrite the ending. Aquarius, letting go does not mean what you gave was meaningless. It means the meaning was already delivered, just not in the form you expected. Notice how your body feels now when you imagine release. There is sadness, yes, but also space, a subtle lightness. A breath you have been holding for years without realizing it. That breath is not failure leaving you. It is truth entering. You are allowed to walk away without proof that it all paid off. You are allowed to stop carrying what no longer responds to your care. You are allowed to choose forward motion over familiarity. Here is a gentler question to sit with tonight. What if the lesson was never about staying longer, but about learning when your loyalty was no longer required? Because the universe does not measure your worth by how much you endure. It responds when you finally choose alignment over effort. And as this understanding settles, you may feel a quiet readiness forming. Not to rush, not to force healing, just to loosen your grip. Something new is already sensing that space, waiting for you to stop holding the past with both hands so you can receive what is next with an open one. It did not happen all at once. There was no thunder at first, just a quiet shift in the air you could not ignore anymore. You remember the moment because your body reacted before your mind did. A tightening in the chest, a stillness, as if something inside you stopped negotiating. The truth did not arrive dramatically, it arrived plainly. A sentence that did not match a promise, an action that contradicted a history of explanations. And suddenly the story you had been living inside no longer held together. That was the collapse, not loud, but undeniable. For a brief second, everything felt unstable. Your sense of direction, your faith in your own judgment, the way you had trusted yourself to read between the lines. It hurt because you realized how much energy you had spent translating someone else's behavior into something you could live with. You had been filling in the gaps, softening the truth, carrying the weight of coherence alone. And when the illusion finally broke, it felt like grief. Not just for the connection, but for the version of reality you had worked so hard to protect. Aquarius, awakenings rarely feel peaceful at first. They feel like disorientation, like standing in a familiar room after the lights go out and realizing how much you were navigating by memory rather than sight. You may have asked yourself how you missed it, how you stayed when signs were quietly rearranging themselves. Be gentle with that question. You were not blind. You were hopeful. And hope can delay clarity without erasing intelligence. What fell apart in that moment was not your future. It was the structure built on compromises you never meant to make forever. The version of the story that required you to keep adjusting your intuition. There is a strange relief that comes after the shock. A calm that surprises you. As if your nervous system recognizes truth faster than your heart can name it. You might notice how silence begins to feel different now. Less threatening, more honest. Because you are no longer trying to maintain something that depends on your constant effort to exist. This is where many people rush to rebuild, to replace what was lost, to prove they are okay. But you, Aquarius, are wired differently. You pause, you observe, you let the dust settle so you can understand what truly collapsed and what remained standing. And what remains is important. Your integrity, your capacity to reflect, your ability to learn without becoming bitter. Here is a question worth holding softly. What if the breakdown was not a punishment, but a correction? What if life intervened because continuing forward would have required you to keep betraying subtle parts of yourself? You are beginning to see that clarity does not always arrive gently. Sometimes it arrives through disruption, through endings that remove what no longer aligns so something more honest can take its place. The pain was real, but so was the awakening. As the noise fades, you may sense something else emerging, a steadier internal compass, a deeper trust in your own perception. Nothing essential about you was destroyed here. Only the illusion that survival required compromise. And now, with the rubble behind you and open space ahead, you are standing at the edge of a quieter truth. One that does not ask you to explain yourself. One that simply waits for you to walk forward when you are ready. When everything finally grew quiet, you noticed something unexpected. Not emptiness, but presence. At first, it felt unfamiliar, like stepping into a room where the noise has stopped and realizing how loud it used to be. You were no longer reaching outward, no longer explaining, no longer bracing yourself for the next misunderstanding. And in that stillness, life began to answer you differently. Support did not announce itself. It arrived subtly. A message at the right moment. A conversation that felt easy instead of draining. Someone listening without needing you to perform or justify your feelings. You started to recognize faces that had always been there, quietly standing at the edges of your life. People who never competed for your energy. Who never asked you to diminish yourself to stay connected. They had been waiting for you to slow down enough to see them. Aquarius, this is not coincidence. This is alignment. For so long, you mistook intensity for intimacy. You believed being needed was the same as being valued. But now your nervous system is learning a new language. One that speaks in calm. In mutual effort. In space that feels safe rather than lonely. You may have wondered why certain paths closed without explanation. Why opportunities dissolved. Why relationships faded instead of deepening. Here is the gentler truth emerging now. You were not being pushed away, you were being redirected. Life was quietly removing you from rooms where your voice would always be secondary. From roles where your insight would be used but not honored. From connections where you would continue giving long after balance was lost. And once you stopped forcing forward motion, new doors opened without resistance. Notice how these openings feel. There is no rush. No pressure to prove your worth. No sense that you must arrive already complete. These connections meet you where you are. They allow you to breathe, to show up imperfect, to be thoughtful without being burdened. You are beginning to understand something important. Being alone for a season is not abandonment. It is recalibration. It creates the space necessary for resonance to find you, for people and paths that recognize your frequency without effort. Ask yourself this softly. What if the quiet period was not a punishment, but protection? What if every delay saved you from repeating an old cycle? Every closed door shielded you from investing in what would eventually cost you your peace. Aquarius, you were never meant to walk this path unsupported. You were meant to walk it authentically. And now that you are no longer negotiating your truth for belonging, life responds with greater honesty. You are not behind. You are not forgotten. You are not invisible. You are exactly where discernment turns into wisdom. As you move forward, you may feel lighter, more selective, less willing to chase what does not choose you back. This is not hardness. This is maturity. And from this place, the connections that form will not require you to disappear. They will ask you to arrive fully. Nothing was taken from you. You were gently removed from what could not sustain you. And what lies ahead does not need to convince you. It will recognize you immediately. A year from now, you will remember this version of yourself with tenderness, not embarrassment, not regret, but respect. You will remember how uncertain everything felt, how the ground beneath you seemed unfamiliar, how silence followed endings you did not choose. And you will understand something you could not see back then. Nothing was falling apart, it was rearranging. By then, your mornings will feel different. Not dramatic, just lighter. Your breath will come easier. Your thoughts will no longer rush to defend who you are. You will notice how calm has replaced urgency, how you no longer wake up needing validation to begin the day. Your sense of self will feel anchored, quiet, unshakable. Aquarius, a year from now, you will trust your inner timing more than outside pressure. You will pause without guilt. You will choose without explaining. You will say no without rehearsing an apology. You will realize how much energy you once spent trying to be understood by people who were never listening. And instead of anger, you will feel relief that you stopped trying. Your relationships will look different, not louder, not more intense, but more honest. You will recognize connection by how safe your nervous system feels in its presence, by how your thoughts slow instead of spiral, by how you are allowed to exist without performing strength or depth. Some people will no longer be part of your life. And surprisingly, that absence will feel natural, necessary, like outgrowing a coat you once needed for survival. Other connections will have emerged quietly, built on mutual respect, shared curiosity, emotional adulthood. You will no longer confuse chaos with chemistry, or sacrifice with love. You will know the difference now. There will be moments when you look back at the storm that changed everything, and instead of wishing it never happened, you will feel gratitude for its precision. It arrived exactly when it needed to. Not to punish you, but to stop you from continuing down a path that required too much self-abandonment. Ask yourself this, gently. What if the version of you listening right now is standing at the exact turning point your future self once prayed for? Because a year from now, you will not need to convince anyone of your worth. You will not chase alignment. It will meet you where you stand. Your intuition will feel sharper, your boundaries clearer, your sense of purpose more embodied, less theoretical. You will move slower, but with certainty. And perhaps the most beautiful change of all, you will stop measuring your life by what you lost and start honoring it by what you protected. The storm you are walking through today is not random. It is intelligent, intentional. It is clearing space for a life that does not ask you to betray yourself in exchange for belonging. So if right now you feel tired, or unsure, or quietly hopeful but afraid to admit it, let that be enough. You do not need to see the full picture yet. You only need to keep choosing honesty over illusion. 1 year from now, you will look back at this moment and understand. This was not the end of anything. This was the foundation. Before you go, stay with me for just a breath longer. If something in this story found you tonight, it was not by chance. Aquarius, you are here because your energy is already shifting. Because a part of you recognized itself in these words and quietly nodded. This was never just a message. It was a mirror. A reminder of how far you have come and how deeply you are learning to trust yourself again. There is strength in you that does not need to announce itself. Wisdom that has been forming through experience, not noise. And a future that responds not to force, but to alignment. As you carry this with you, notice what feels lighter. What no longer needs your explanation. What you are finally ready to release without guilt. If your heart felt seen tonight, let that be your sign. Leave a comment. Not for me, but for the version of you who is choosing clarity over confusion. Your words may be the reassurance another Aquarius needs right now. And if this space feels safe, if this frequency speaks your language, stay connected. Subscribe. You are not meant to walk this awakening alone. More messages are already forming. Deeper insights. Quieter truths. The next chapter is approaching, and it will meet you where you are ready. Above all, trust yourself. Your intuition has been guiding you long before this moment. You are not late. You are exactly on time. Take this energy with you, carry it gently. And remember, the journey does not end here. It continues.